Hello, everyone. Welcome to the St. Louis Art Museum's Art Speaks program. My name is Jessica Kennedy, and I'm the educator for adult learning at the museum. Before we begin, please familiarize yourself with the Q&A section located on your screen. Feel free to enter your questions at any time during the program, and we will choose a few to answer at the end. Also, there is live auto transcription available for this program. Please click the CC icon to activate or deactivate the subtitles. For today's talk, a behind-the-scenes look at the making of the culture, we are joined by two of the exhibition's curators, Hannah Klemm, former SLAM curator and current curator of modern and contemporary art at the Blanton Museum of Art, and Andréa Purnell, audience development manager at SLAM. Thanks for being here today, Hannah and Andréa.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much. Andrea and I are really excited to be here to talk to you all, especially kind of giving a behind the scenes. This is a fun part for us to really talk about how this exhibition came to be. And so, as Jessica mentioned, this is a little bit about the planning, but really the ways in which this exhibition, the culture, hip hop and contemporary art in the 21st century, really looked to community and to embracing conversation and talking to as many people as possible throughout the planning of the show. So, for us, I think it was a really unique experience to curating the exhibition. But we hope that this is a model for many going forward and thinking about exhibition curating. So we're just going to start to give a very brief overview of the exhibition for anyone who maybe hasn't seen it. And if you haven't seen it, it would be wonderful for you to go. It's on view at the St. Louis Art Museum until January 1st, 2025. And then it has a wonderfully long tour. So you can catch it after that in Frankfurt, Germany, in Cincinnati, Ohio, at the Cincinnati Art Museum, and at the Art Gallery of Ontario. So just if you miss it in St. Louis, it doesn't mean you can't see it. It is a long journey ahead. So the culture, hip hop and contemporary art in the 21st century is an exhibition of contemporary art primarily made in the last 23 years, hence why we really wanted to iterate in the title that the 21st century was a part of our thinking. And we'll talk a little bit more about how all of that came to be. But the exhibition is thematically arranged across multiple sections. Some of you maybe came to our last talk. We went through all of the sections of the exhibition, but it's really focusing on the way in which contemporary artists have been influenced by hip hop as a cultural phenomenon. And that's a really important way of considering this. It was very much part of our early thinking is if you want to do an exhibition about contemporary art and then a major cultural phenomenon like hip hop that has its ties to music, it has its ties to dance, it has its ties to graffiti art, how do you make that a manageable element of planning the show? And so, the first step with any exhibition is, who's kind of organizing it. And this was actually an amazing exhibition that was it was kind of jointly organized between two originating institutions. So the originating institutions were the Baltimore Art Museum in Baltimore, Maryland, and the St. Louis Art Museum, our team. And so from its original inception, the exhibition had these kind of two really interesting sites, interesting cities, deep museum histories, and also deep histories of hip hop and hip hop culture. And that was something that from the earliest moment we all knew was incredibly important. And when considering hip hop culture and considering contemporary art, I honestly believe, and we'll talk about this throughout the hour, that contemporary art needs to also be constantly embracing more voices. Contemporary art is not anyone's, it's all of ours. It's the cultural element of our time. So we all have something to say about contemporary art, not just curators. So from the beginning, we really wanted to not just have a curator sitting in a room full of books reading about hip hop and thinking about it. It was a dynamic team. So the team of curators was 4 curators and 2 sort of graduate fellow and curatorial assistants. So it was Asma Naeem, who is now the director of the Baltimore Art Museum, Gami Giot, who was at the time the chief education officer at the Baltimore Art Museum and is now the chief education officer and community engagement officer at the San Francisco Museum of Art. It was myself. At the time, I was the associate curator of modern and contemporary art at the St. Louis Art Museum, and Andrea, who is our audience development manager. And then we had 2 amazing assistants. We hired a research fellow who had a background and interest in hip hop fashion named Ricky Bird. And we had a curatorial assistant who honestly, the show wouldn't have come together without them. They were the glue that held all of the shipping and arrangements and loan forms together, and that was Carlin Thomas, who was formerly at the BMA. So that's kind of the beginning. And Andrea, I want to pass it to you to see if you want to say anything about that initial moment of us all coming together and kind of being invited into, planning an exhibition in this way, as part of this team.
Wow. Well, it has and continues to be quite a ride. I'll say from my lens as the audience development manager, my role is simply to invite non-traditional audiences into the museum space, to be a warm smile, a handshake, whatever it needs to get you in the door, to keep you coming back. So this show for me was an amazing, beautiful collision of the best of both worlds, right? We were definitely working to think about new audiences and ways that we could attract them. But when you invite audience to be a part of the curatorial team, you are indeed, making a strong statement. And our statement was, in fact, that, to your point, this polyvocal approach, not only did we want to hear from community, we needed to. It was necessary for us to know that we couldn't, even with the amazing team that Hannah just laid out, still was not enough, right? We couldn't think about the show in silo. And so having a chance to have this opportunity to hear from as many people as possible, I think is what has created such an authentic and just palatable, approach. People coming in and really feeling like they're seeing themselves in the works of art. So it's been a joy. It's been a joy. And I too look forward to this kind of conversation because it's casual in a sense, and we can talk about the moments when we were like, oh my goodness, what in the world? And then all the happy surprises, right? All of these moments where we're like, wow, we had no idea that, community and our advisory group, which you'll talk more about, would say this to us, but wow, look how it's influenced and help us rethink, reimagine even our checklist.
Yeah, I mean, that's an incredibly important point. And I think, Andrea, you said it so well. When you invite community in, you also have to listen. And I think that that's something that is incredibly important with this exhibition is, a lot of the times you're invited as a curator, or you are a curator and you have an expertise, or, you have a PhD in something. And in this case, we're dealing with 23 years, 50 years of hip hop history, 23 years of contemporary art, and the idea of expertise is as polyvocal as the people that we had to talk to. There is no singular idea of expertise in the concept of the show, and we had to very early on realize that we were not experts. We were not the statement makers. We were part of a long lineage of people who've been a part of hip hop from the beginning. We were a part of curators who had done exhibitions thinking about these intersections, but we were also part of a world in which hip hop has become a global phenomenon, and people have incredible attachments to what hip hop means to them. And we really wanted to embrace that as a kind of structuring device, because early on, I think we all had moments of overwhelm of how do you deal with global hip hop culture and contemporary art? And the answer early on was like, we don't know. And so, and we were very okay, I think, always saying we don't know, but we know how to ask and we know how to listen. And I think we learned how to listen even better as the years went on.
Yes.
But we always knew we had to listen. So our starting point was, okay, if you're doing a show about contemporary art and hip hop, you really need to start with the art. So the very first kind of iteration of what we call advisory groups. So museums often do advisory groups. I think it's a pretty common term for getting a group of people who often do have expertise or, relational reasons to be there to have conversations about what you're doing and what your show is, to bring more voices to the table. This was a very unique element in that we had many advisory groups because of all the things we just said. But the first conversation that was had was a roundtable where every single curator who had participated or curated or created a show that intersected contemporary art and hip hop was brought around a table. Because again, this is not something new. This is part of a legacy, and it's going to be continue to be part. We hope, our mantra for a long time was, we hope that any of the problems, any of the things we can't do in this show, somebody else will do. That this is the start of many shows, not just a show. And so that group came together and it was a really incredible roundtable. And the transcript of that conversation ended up in the catalog as a kind of grounding moment for thinking about this exhibition art historically and kind of curatorially. But very quickly from that, that was a kind of early groundwork just to find out what's been done, find out where people's intentions were. And then we knew we needed advisors who had deep ties to hip hop. So we put out a lot of feelers. I don't know, Andrea, do you want to talk at all about the process of like finding the right people? It was a lot of talking to community, a lot of talking to other people in the field.
Yeah. I think this approach of once we did find someone, it was tell us 3 more people that need to be at the table, right? And even this level of agency, like removing all of the barriers, it was truly not only who do you know, but perhaps the approach of even having someone else make the ask on our behalf to say, hey, we want to invite you, was also this level of us extending our reach. So we were intentional. This thinking of trying to be as diverse as possible. I can go to the list before. This was the global group. And once Hannah and I became a part of the project, we knew that having this hyper local approach, which I'll talk more about, but even from the global aspect of including, our local folk like Tef Poe, rapper, educator, journalist, and activist, to be a part of the conversation would also be critical. And as we continue to talk to our global advisory team, that's what I think was this shift, which I don't want to get too far ahead of you, of us thinking as a curatorial team, wait a minute, we're missing something, and that is our local community. That is our Baltimore, that is St. Louis. How can we even tell a story of hip hop, in these 2 communities without even thinking about how hip hop has affected these 2 cities in particular? So that, not only was it a shift, it was a go back to the drawing board moment, for us as a curatorial team that helped the approach shape it in such a way that included local artists.
Yeah, I think so our first conversation we had on Zoom, and this was very early on in the process. What we did, you're probably like, what did they look at? What did they do? How did they advise you? So we actually brought everything, all of the work we'd done, which was months of work, to this group of people. We brought every image we were interested in. We brought every artist that we'd spoken to, like the images of the work that we were considering for the show. And we brought ideas of thematic kind of sections, early thematic sections. And Andrea and Ricky organized a full day that we had a variety of activities in which we asked them to kind of explore. We broke up into small groups and talked about different themes. We did full-scale presentations of the overarching ideas of the show. And then we opened everything up for, God, it felt like ages at the end, for them to really come at us and tell us everything that they liked, they didn't like, they agreed about, they disagreed about. And we listened and we opened ourselves up to all of the things that we were missing, all of the things we were doing wrong, all of the ways in which we should move in different directions. And it was incredibly enlightening. It was so amazing. So do you want to tell the story about how we came to the beautiful moment in the exhibition that has Deion Alexander's wigs and Lauren Halsey's synthetic hair piece, because that came out of that first conversation?
Absolutely. So yes, we as a curatorial team, fully trained folks like Hannah, who've worked in the space and know the craft. We were perhaps a bit too buttoned up in thinking there is no way that we can have wigs in an exhibition. We can't have wigs in an art museum, right? And especially when we think about what we'll talk about more of the 5 pillars of hip hop, fashion, and the ways in which hip hop artists adorn themselves, we know are just true to the culture. And they absolutely are. So with us not having such a thing included, that was the one thing that the advisory group was like, where are the wigs, right? It was a clear moment of, I don't want to say necessarily a misstep, but I think for us, we thought that was a bit too on the nose. And for them, they were like, no, that is the story, right? That is absolutely the story. So it gave us a chance to I think just think about it differently, and to just also really think about, again, this authentic approach, and not only what would audiences want to see, perhaps you wouldn't expect to see it, and that therein lies another moment of aha and surprise for you as a visitor. But I think us really being reminded of how necessary it was to the story, and if we didn't include it, shame on us. So yes, that was definitely an aha moment for sure.
And part of that aha moment, that's a kind of microcosm of the bigger aha moment, is early on, we had been very narrow in having a kind of question we asked ourselves as we were talking to artists and looking at work, which is like, what makes this hip hop? And so we couldn't always answer that as to what makes wigs hip hop versus something else, what makes XYZ hip hop versus popular culture versus Black culture. And so that moment with this advisory committee of amazing hip hop, artists, hip hop scholars, curators, they were like, you need to open up to what hip hop is, which is that it is the culture. It is broader. And the title ended up coming to represent that in a certain way, but that hip hop is it's so important, and it has permeated contemporary culture and society so much that those things are hip hop. And so it became a kind of device for us. And that's where influence came in. How an artist was influenced by hip hop, we weren't going to judge what that meant to them anymore. We were going to allow hip hop to really permeate society and to, have it sing in the exhibition that it was truly ensconced in contemporary culture. So after we had that amazing Zoom meeting, which was really early in the process, we applied for basically a grant, and we were invited to come do a really wonderful multi-day workshop at the Clark Institute, which is part of Williams College. And this is the thing a lot of exhibitions apply for, not everybody gets to go do, and they fund and kind of bring a team, an advisory committee out to the Clark to spend a day or two doing deep dive scholarly work onto your project. So for this presentation, we had our advisory committee members do their own presentation on their work as artists, as thinkers, as scholars. And then the curatorial team actually showed them a much more buttoned up version. We showed them a floor plan for the first time. We actually had them in real time read our labels and wall texts and critique them with us in person in this room. And we also had dinner together, and we spent time together. We sat around a fire together, and all of those things. Those were the moments. I think the evening where we were sitting in the fire on a cold fall day in New England was really those moments where we got to the core of what this show was and what it was meant to be.
No, those are wonderful memories for, I think, not only this advisory group, but us as a curatorial team. Mind you, Hannah and I personally spent many hours working together, but Friday mornings at 10 a.m. was our time, together as a group on Zoom, because this was an opportunity, to find a way to connect, and us having a chance to meet and be together as a full curatorial team, find moments to, catch corners, even if it was 1 o'clock in the morning, just to have that in-person time was it is nostalgic. It makes me smile just thinking about it. And yes, I agree. I think, just also quiet moments with some of the individuals around the table in deeper conversation. And Hannah's right. I mean, we really showed them what we had, and they told us what they thought. They were not shy about letting us know. We also went over, hey, this is how we're thinking about programming. And they too were very informative and effective in their feedback and helping us think about not only how we are creating a show for the audience to come and see, but how can this approach be taken even beyond our walls. So wonderful group. This is another image of us. There's a lovely work in the show called Open Closed. And so it's this idea of the same people, but in different poses. And so this is kind of our open closed moment. The photo was taken by Wendell Patrick, who is one of the members of the advisory team. He is also a professor of hip hop at the Peabody Institute, and as well responsible as one of the collaborators on the soundscape that you hear when you come through the exhibition. And I don't know if you want to talk about that, Hannah, but that too, the soundscape was birthed from the time that we spent with the advisory team.
Yeah, the soundscape that you hear when you walk through, which is a kind of beautiful ambient, but incredibly, you know, intellectually constructed kind of history of hip hop in and of itself, came out of the fact we had so many conversations about how you can't have a silent hip hop show, but we didn't want to privilege a certain voice over another. Like we couldn't just have, one rapper in the room. We had to kind of create a way that hip hop was this overarching cultural phenomenon. And that took many, many, many hours of conversation and was always a struggle, because how do you create a space where everything in hip hop is allowed to be present, but you don't take away or focus too much on any one thing, which was always our struggle. How do you make this really about the art, about influence, about how contemporary artists really truly are influenced by hip hop? And the soundscape came out of those conversations in an absolutely beautiful way, because it referenced Baltimore's history, St. Louis's history, our advisory committee, and created an ambient, really beautiful hip hop rhythm that didn't take away from either the art or this idea of hip hop being a kind of communal space. And so after these wonderful experiences, Andréa and I came back to St. Louis, and Andréa is really the brains behind this, so I'll let her talk about it. But we realized that this was also an exhibition that was going to have unique and a unique evolution through each city it went to. And each city needed to deeply consider what it meant for the show to be there. And we needed to start thinking very specifically as to what the St. Louis presentation would do, how programming, how, everything surrounding it involved and centered the St. Louis community. And so we knew we needed another advisory group, because, we couldn't get enough of it at this point. And so we decided to put together a St. Louis advisory group. And I think it was changing for the direction of the show, in terms, especially programmatically, but in terms of how we spoke about it and how we presented it.
Mm-hmm. You said that so eloquently. In short, I'll say I am born and raised right here in St. Louis, Missouri. And I know we've got some folks on the call joining us. And if you know St. Louis, then you know St. Louis. I like to consider myself so St. Louis. And what I mean by that is, if you know this community, you better not think you can have something that is about the history that is so near and dear to this particular city, especially with hip hop being thought of, really as an epicenter here. It was actually first played on the airwaves, the first hip hop song right here in our region. So it's near and dear for so many different reasons. And so Hannah is right. We not only did we just not get enough, I really felt like we hadn't heard from enough St. Louis voices. So we brought folks around the table, and this was a great example of, hey, you must be there, but who else must be there? Give me other names. And so we really worked with this amazing team of folks to help us think even deeper about the local connection. How can we, and so we did, we presented the works to them as well and said, hey, this is what we got. This is what we're thinking. What more can be done? And this was at a critical moment, and of course, Hannah can talk more about, gosh, by this time of where we were, we should have been long done with this sort of work and thinking about, works that are being added to the show, but we were not. And so they continued to help us make further connections. I can remember one of the comments out of this group, them saying they wanted to feel St. Louis pride when they walked through the exhibition. They wanted moments for St. Louis to truly, truly stand up. And so while the works are the same in both the Baltimore and St. Louis presentation, we did, in fact, not only did we listen, but we listened deeply, and we found ways to really make St. Louis stand up. One example would be Adrian Octavius Walker's Great Day in St. Louis photo, a real tribute to hip hop notables that we had literally blown up. It's life size, and you can come in and almost feel the hip hop aficionados, jumping off of the image itself, and again, making sure that even our new ways to think about hip hop, like artists like Smino, are clear and present. You can see, and the artists that we have connected to the show that have ties to St. Louis, making sure that their work is situated in such a way that the pride of St. Louis can be felt. And so genuine in such a true way. So this group was critical. They also helped very much with programming aspects and how we thought about, again, ways to continue our approach with programming with both adults as well as children. So they were wonderful. It's nice to see their faces because I'm thinking about how we're still the continuum of connection with these folks. They gave us street cred, like Tef said on Friday. They lent us their street cred and went out into community, and they were cheerleaders for the show. I have walked into the exhibition and literally seen them giving tours to their friends and family. Like they've taken it on almost as if they were a part of the curatorial team, which is exactly what we hope they would feel. So what a pleasure. What a pleasure. Oh, any more words you want to say about?
I was just gonna say they, we needed them because we also, they became ambassadors for what we were doing because we listened to what they said, because we took what they said and actually made elements of the show things that they believed in and were proud of, because they were a part of the conversation, because they watched the changes being made. All of our advisory committee have said, we walked through with Wendell Patrick, who saw in Baltimore and saw it in St. Louis, and he said that he saw the changes being embedded in the show. So it wasn't just asking for people to be on our side, it was bringing them into the process so that we were all on the same page and that we're all doing this together. And I think that's the true element of this polyvocal approach that we talk about, is that we were all in it together. And without this advisory committee, without these local elements, all of what Andréa is going to talk about now, how it really got pushed out into community and became a part of community outside of the walls of the museum, it wouldn't have happened in the same way. But we created a network already, and they'd created a network.
Yeah. Wow. So with the network, like hip hop, the show emphasizes community access and engagement in a crucial, really critical way. And inspired by the various creative modes of hip hop, there is what's considered an overarching structure for this particular way in which we engaged beyond our walls. And that is really thinking about the 5 pillars of hip hop, which is a classification system. I often hear people say hip hop equals rap. Well, in fact, there's so much more. So DJ Africa Bambaataa, who is one of the considered godfathers of hip hop, is credited with creating and developing this classification system that we see here, again, referred to as the 5 pillars of hip hop, the 5 elements of hip hop. And it captures the core elements and the essence of this art form. And so it's knowledge, which is this idea of a moral, social, spiritual principle that really informs not only you, inspires hip hop, inspires wellness, thinking about the betterment of your community. There's emceeing, which is also known as rapping, and that is the spoken word or poetry to a beat. DJing, which is the artistic handling of beats and music, and then breakdancing, or also known as b-boying or b-girling, which is hip hop's dance form. And then lastly, graffiti, which is this idea of a highly stylized painting. So again, all of these elements is truly what makes up hip hop. And so with this in mind, we were inspired to think about, again, the exhibition outside of the walls. And I want to give credit to our director, Min Jung Kim, who charged us, with this inspiration and said, I want to really see this in and throughout the city of St. Louis, and to really carry the celebration into community, which was such a beautiful opportunity. So with this in mind, we approached 5 organizations of varied sizes and types throughout St. Louis, and with their own expertise, varied and interdisciplinary, we invited them to interact and to respond to one of the 5 pillars of hip hop in partnership with the museum, as well as teaching artists. So as you can see, we worked with St. Louis Artworks for the graffiti pillar, and I'll talk a bit more about the project. Harris-Stowe State University for the knowledge pillar. Code Red led our breakdancing pillar, St. Louis County Library led our DJing pillar, and then Herb Arts led our MCing pillar. So I'll spend a few minutes talking about the approach that each organization took. This is us yet again, talking to more folks. This was in fact the kickoff with the organizations. So gosh, almost this exact time last year, we hosted the groups that I mentioned, their leadership to come into the museum. We offered an opportunity to formally introduce the project, to let them know what the exhibition was all about. So you see Hannah and I there talking to the group, introducing the exhibition, showing them the works that would be included, not only to generate ideas, to generate discussion, cross-pollination that clearly was happening. Many of the organizations, while they knew one another, they'd never had a chance to work together. So this was a wonderful opportunity for them. And I'll say this, we said, hey, this is the show. Hey, this is the project. And these are the 5 pillars. But what we didn't do was specifically assign a pillar to an organization. It was really up to them to decide where they saw themselves and how they fit. That too was very much by design. You know, we didn't want to necessarily prescribe, but it worked out in such a way that they all picked a discipline that was for the most part specific to what they do, but sometimes, as you'll see, they really took it to the next level as a partner and found ways to incorporate the art form and the subject matter into their work in a very unique way. So the first pillar, graffiti, was led by St. Louis Artworks from January the 20th through April the 27th. They led a 16-week apprenticeship. So in early in 2023, even in advance of the exhibition, they began, and teaching artist Byron Rogers led, it was a 13-week mural residency with a cohort of teen apprentices at St. Louis Artworks. So here's Byron working with the apprentices there. More photos just showing you some of the ways that the apprentices were inspired, thinking about inspirations of the history of hip hop, and then ultimately designing a mural to commemorate the 50th anniversary. More images of Byron guiding the youth as they really transformed this mural and translated their design of the mural to the works that you see here. And then what you're seeing is Saturday, April the 29th, the finished mural. We had an unveiling for friends and family and supporters to see. And then this is an up close version. And you're also seeing even moments and connections tied to our own St. Louis histories. So I'll let Hannah talk a bit about this project that we like to call Curators in Community, which was our opportunity to go into artworks, tell them more about the exhibition, perhaps inspired, but I'll say, and I'm sure Hannah would agree, I think they inspired us.
Probably more. Oh, it was really fun. We did what they called a client visit. So we, came in and we did a whole run through of the show. And it was so wonderful, but it was so interesting to see, having worked on the last 21st century, really thinking about these are the future. These kids are the future. And at one point, they definitely made me feel old when they talked about iPods being antiquated technology. But they listened and they really heard what we were saying, and they took the history of hip hop and really thinking about it from a young person's perspective into their mural. And I think what they created was really beautiful and vibrant, and showed how much they actually heard us, even though it kind of felt like they weren't at the time because they were teens. They were listening.
They were listening, but gosh, you're right. I too felt ancient, but it was so much fun, so much fun. And the next pillar is the knowledge pillar, led by Harris-Stowe State University from April the 12th through August, and continuing on, which I'll talk about. But first, it was the knowledge pillar, a part of the university's inauguration week, celebrating new president, Dr. LaTanya Collins Smith. we had the wonderful opportunity to be on campus for an event in collaboration with mental health service providers, behavioral health response. We hosted a public on-campus event that focused on mental health, art making, and the inspirations of hip hop. Wonderful opportunity to collaborate with the university in this very unique way. This here in the photo is teaching artist and mental health professional Tremont Davis, who is leading participants in what you see as an art experience. He was using exploration to think more about color, painting, with the themes of personal identity. And as the session was happening, they were all listening to hip hop music that was curated and very particularly by Jade, who is a wonderful, wonderful, not only mental health professional, but DJ here in our St. Louis community. And she thought about the knowledge pillar. All of the songs were inspired by the knowledge pillar. And again, infused in each one of the sessions that were happening throughout the space to just further think about not only hip hop as an art form, but how the music itself might inspire the art making. Some more examples of the art making happening at the release. And then it got so good that even President Dr. LaTanya Collins-Smith herself joined in, and this is her interacting with a workshop participant. So not only was this a wonderful opportunity, we had the pleasure of presenting at a conference early in January, the Museum Next conference, about this particular pillar and how wellness and well-being is not only effective, especially on college campuses, but the collaboration between museums and HBCUs. So we're excited to continue to tell the story. And I can also say that Harris Stowe has not only taken this project in such a way, it was a beautiful day, as you can see there, but they've incorporated an entire wellness center on campus that they have, where they're now incorporating art making into their work as an everyday practice for their students for mental health and cognitive release. Another way in which we're continuing to engage with Harris Stowe is with their gallery engagement guides. So this is a program, a paid program, in fact, where we had a part-time employment opportunity. The goal is to recruit students interested in leadership and community service, learning interpersonal skills and real world solutions, learning new skills and working in a museum. So the guides receive training on the museum's collection and exhibitions, and as well, they're assisted by SLAM docents to really not only help new visitors as they may come into the space, they're wearing Ask Me buttons, and you can ask them more about the artwork, but also a chance for them to gain exposure to potential careers in museums. So a pathway for sure. A wonderful opportunity. What I love about this project so much, and it's a pilot, but it's something that has been so effective that we're hoping to continue it, is that the docents talk about how much they have learned from the gallery engagement guides, you know, especially in this process. So it has been an intergenerational learning opportunity that has been a real treat. Next, I'll talk quickly about our breakdancing pillar, which was led by Code Red. You're seeing here Anthony Red Williams, who's the artistic director of Code Red Dance Studio. And he worked with us in an amazing way to organize and lead an evening of hip hop dance programs, the only one of the 5 pillar groups that happened here on site at the museum. So you're seeing right in our auditorium space, Anthony Red clearly getting down, teaching his hip hop course. And then you're seeing also on that Friday evening, it started with a beginning level commercial hip hop class, a demonstration class. And you see folks really getting into it. Continuing here, and this also had a DJ that was really charging the folks up and continuing in the spirit of hip hop. We also were delighted by 314 My City, which was this amazing video that is truly a salute to our local hip hop scene, created by Red Williams, shot at the former Skate Laborious. So a wonderful documentary. And then they had a super cool dance battle, again, right there on stage. So you're seeing some of the folks live and in action, battle on stage before a panel of judges, and rap dance battle, dancer koozie, as you can see here. Really exciting events, breaking it down, a high energy, a wonderful time, very well attended. And the DJ pillar, which was led by St. Louis County Library from August the 26th through September the 1st. This created a wonderful opportunity for faceted way of thinking about not only DJing, but in multiple locations. So they really took this project on. And in fact, the St. Louis County Library had over 50 classes and training sessions related to hip hop in the month of August, helping us celebrate all throughout St. Louis County. On August the 26th, you're seeing here DJ V-Tom led a turntablism workshop at the Natural Bridge branch. And you can see him interacting with the folks that joined him in his class. A wonderful opportunity to learn about, again, one of the 5 pillars of hip hop. And it requires extensive knowledge. He in fact taught me so much just in him preparing for the class as a teaching artist. So not only did they have a turntablism workshop, they had a block party. And so participants from the workshop were able to come and show off their skills. It happened on Friday, September the 1st from 5:30 to 7:30 in North County. Here's an image of the block party happening. And it's something that the library is planning to continue because the community, it was so well received. And the community came out in droves. And as you can see, it was all sorts of ages having a wonderful, wonderful time. In addition to this, they also created a book list of all sorts of ways that we can not only continue to think about the scholarship of hip hop, but learn more about hip hop from their reading libraries. So all sorts of ways in which this collaboration was such a joy and pleasure for so many. And then lastly, the MC pillar, which was led by Herb Arts from September the 23rd through the 14th. They provided middle school students an opportunity to learn more about rapping and beat making, as you can see here in this hip hop workshop. So here are a few images of the students in the workshop. You can see MK Stallings, who's the director of Herb Arts Gallery, as he's leading the students in beat making and rhyme development, introducing the 4 basic 4-line sequence. And you're seeing Go Giraffe, who is a freestyle artist, really teaching different beats. Students got to practice making their own beats using this 4-line word structure. And then it culminated at an event on Saturday, October the 14th, where the participants were able to showcase their skills, their creative skills, and what they learned from this workshop series. So it literally went from, North County to North City. And if you are in St. Louis, you know how vast that range is. And we wanted to take over the city, if you will, with this celebration. And I just want to publicly have an opportunity to thank the 5 pillar organizations for joining us. We could not have done it without you. And it just really speaks to the importance of not only access, not only community engagement, but really doing it with folks that are doing this work all the time, so you joining us in this celebration was truly our pleasure. And we wish you continued success and good fortune, and we'll look for ways to collaborate with you more in the future. Hannah, any thoughts, comments that you'd like to make about the 5 Pillars of Community project?
Oh, I think that it was beyond, I don't know about you, Andréa, you dream big and are so good at this stuff. But for me, it was so amazing to see it all actually come together. Everyone that was approached had such a wonderful response. And I think it was because of all the building blocks that, were put in place. And I think that everything was kind of beyond my expectations in the best possible way, how it was embraced. And, then we can kind of lead into thinking about final thoughts on the exhibition and how it relates to this. And I saw a question about the catalog, and we can talk about that for a second too. That, part of the reason it was beyond my expectations is because contemporary art is not something everybody thinks of as easy or accessible or what they want to be a part of. And this, there was a Basquiat, and there was a few people, Mark Bradford, but honestly, even those names don't always have a wide reach in, public spheres. And this showed it didn't matter whether people recognized the name, they recognized what was behind it. They recognized the feelings that were there, the imagery that was there, the kind of references to, a culture that people all over the world embrace. And I think that all of these parts showed that contemporary art, if thought of within people's lived experiences, can be deeply meaningful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I saw this, somebody mentioned that the catalog was different than a normal museum exhibition catalog. And yep, that was right on. You saw it. So that was another part of it. The catalog was never just going to be a, coffee table book about the show. It needed to be something that embraced all of these elements about hip hop. So it became a hip hop reader, and it became a site where we could really approach people all over the world who are thinking about hip hop in unique ways, from an essay that's about how the way that verbs in Japanese function makes rhyming really difficult. So how do you create rhymes in Japanese hip hop when, you have verbs at the end that are quite similar always to create kind of meaning? There was, stylists talking about what it meant to be a part of, 90s hip hop and these different moments. And so the catalog became this kind of reader that was then accompanied by all of the images from the show. So it really set this tone for the images of the show to just be set within a broad context of hip hop, and hip hop from the most scholarly to, an interview with DJ Charlie Chan and Damon Davis, really getting at St. Louis hip hop and how important it was. So the goal of the catalog was to mirror the kind of idea of the show, which was how hip hop has really infused contemporary life and has justifiably become recognized as one of the most important cultural movements of the 20th century.
Yeah, even deepening the polyvocal approach. There are over 50 contributors to the catalog. So to Hannah's
we all
point,
almost went blind trying to copy edit it.
Hannah's
But
point.
it was amazing, and it was very, very intentional.
Someone also asked, is the soundscape available online somewhere? Unfortunately, no, it's not available online. But that just gives you yet another reason to come back into the galleries and enjoy it for as long as it's here. But no, I'm sorry, it's not available online. We have just more pictures of kind of Hannah and I doing things behind the scenes, like gallery talks. And we really wanted to maybe use the last few minutes to, think deeper about the process of what it meant to have an audience person bugging you every chance you could get, Hannah, right? in this curatorial world, right? Again, I've described as having community on my shoulders, and I mean that in the best possible way. So every time I'm talking to Hannah, I'm, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I often thought, my goodness, this can't be this easy with every curator. So I'll say she's definitely one of my favorites. And what I mean by that is her openness and her willingness to let it happen, right? Let it be, let community have their say. And she listens so deeply. So I publicly want to thank you. This has been a beautiful journey. Definitely a joy, a bright shining light in my career. And so much of that is simply because it was you that I had the pleasure of working with on this project. So thank you.
Well, that's very sweet, but also, the same goes for you. Like, not everybody could have done this. And one of the things I think that's so at first, when Andréa and I were having these early conversations, I was like, I'm not a person who should necessarily be doing all of this. Like, yes, I know contemporary art very well. I'm well versed in contemporary art, but I'm not as well versed in hip hop. And I learned so much. I have a crazy appreciation of hip hop now. As Andréa knows, I got my knowledge base very quickly. I'd come in and tell her about things she's known about for years, and she's like, yes, you've learned some things about hip hop. That's great. But it's really genuinely, all that, it's really genuinely changed the way that I curate. And I think Asma, Gamian, I think the whole team would say that. I think that it's shown that these models not only work, they are what museums want to achieve is this ability to bring people in, to kind of break down our walls, to take away that idea of being an expert as a singular entity, as opposed to us all being experts in
Mhm.
something and how we move in the world. And that really, art is about, it's about understanding people. It's about understanding our time. It's truly, something that can make really positive change in the world. And I think that part of that and being open to that is letting it be slippery and not having it have to be a certain way. And we were constantly negotiating that. We were
Mm.
constantly being like, we, from an academic standpoint, this would be great. But from what we're talking to about these, about with the community advisories, like this doesn't work. And really being
Mhm.
willing to, break down those barriers and be okay with things being a little bit nebulous and
Mhm.
complicated, because people find space when they can be welcome to a plurality of ideas and things don't have to
Mm.
be a certain way. And I think contemporary art is that. I don't think it has to have a singular meaning. And this show really opened that up to being like, hey, what do you see in it?
Mm.
What does this mean to you?
Mm. No, I love that. I love that. And I do hope, more museums will not only think about the process, because it's not easy. And like I just want to say very clear, uh, this is not a cakewalk, not by any stretch of the imagination. You have to not only be dedicated to the process, you have to believe in this process and know that it is for the betterment of all things, right? Otherwise, it can be daunting, because you're right. Community will ask for what they'll ask for because they have perhaps no idea. We kind of demystified the curatorial process, if you will, even for myself, but you have no idea what goes into saying, yes, this worked, not that one, this one, right? Just that alone. And so I think being able to, you know, yes, go ahead.
But you have to hold, what I think is really interesting is that all of us learned, like the curatorial team, the advisory groups, the local partners, everybody learned how to say their piece, but hold space for the fact the only way to make it work was compromise. And I think a
Mm,
key element of that was very early on from every advisory committee, every single one, we got the question of like, where's so and so? Where's Nellie?
yes.
Where's, you know, whoever? And
And by the
everybody
way,
had,
Nelly, you are in the show. So if you want to come and see it tomorrow, you're there. Okay, go ahead.
everyone had, they ended up being there. But just these notions that, these touch points. And we really, as a Curo team, I think it stressed us out for a long time. Like, how do we represent that? Everybody's going to have their something that's not there.
Yes.
But we had to own the fact that what we were producing was this overall, that everything was there in just different ways.
Mhm.
And it was, you brought your Nelly or whoever it was to the show and saw it in there because it was present in hip hop culture. But we had to learn to listen, but still all play our roles. I mean, I think that happened a
Yes.
few times
Yes.
with the soundscape where Wendell was like, you have to trust me, I'm the musician. And,
Right.
there were times with the community groups where people were like, I know how to do this, this will work. And
Hmm.
so we all learned that we all heard, we all listened. And then if we didn't agree, we all took the space and came up with a really good compromise.
Yes. The trust walk. Yes.
We all
Absolutely.
definitely left some meetings being frazzled at times.
Oh, for sure. For sure. For sure. For sure. No, yeah. I'll also share that while audience is my jam, and community and curating was, this was a very novel space. What's not new to me is the arts, period. So I am a performing artist. So coming at this from an angle where theater is very much my background, from being on stage to directing to, stage managing. And what I loved is finding comfort, especially once it got to what I like to think of as the staging of the show. Once it was time for works to be hung, I was like, whoa, this is transferable. This feels so normal. It feels so natural. So much of what happens behind the scenes when you're not only creating a play to mounting it on the stage is very much so what's happening in the world of a curator. So I found solace in being able to, jump into your world and be comfortable there. I didn't feel it didn't feel so foreign, and that was a a beautiful thing.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you're
really
amazing
nice.
at it. And now you're a contemporary art expert. So, but another thing I think we have to note that I think maybe has gotten fallen through the cracks a few times, but we're very, very aware of it, is we had an external design team, which was another huge part. And they were specifically chosen. They all had very strong opinions about hip hop. It was, a Black-led team at a Black-owned design firm in DC who came in, and they were architects, which, I mean, talking about another add-on, having architects and curators and museum
Yes.
directors and audience and advisory committees, like so many different voices and different ways of seeing. But, that was a beautiful experience. But again, there were so many times where what we're used to as museum professionals and what they're used to at architects rubbed up against each other, and everybody listened and everybody compromised. And in the end, the show is just beautiful because of them and because of what they brought to it and their vision. And I think they were completely integral to the Smith group and the whole team. Just like, I think we all learned so much from them and how they saw the show. And they didn't just take us at face value. We presented the show to them tons of times, and they at times were absolutely pushing back on us as to why something was where or what section something was in. And so they designed these slat walls, they designed all of the modular units and the color scheme, and they created the layout with us. They were there every step of the way.
Absolutely. There's a question in the chat that is, I'll throw at you, Hannah. How far out did you both create your advisory boards, a curatorial team, and host the presentation events? I'm just curious as to how long it took from the drawing board during meetings to finally having the open reception.
This was fast. I'll tell you
Yes.
that normally museum shows take like 5 years, and we did this in like 2.5.
Yes. Yeah, lightning speed. But
so
so much
was
of that
fast.
was because hip hop is fast, right? Like we knew we had to, and as well, trying to really capitalize on the 50th anniversary and being a part of this rhythm of the year, we had to move quickly. We had to move very quickly.
So this was a little abnormal. Usually you do want to plan things out. I mean, I feel like Jessica could actually answer this question the best, like how far events need to be planned out. But usually you do need to plan things out like several months to, even longer in advance. But we were moving in real time and we were being very responsive. And we have to give a huge amount of credit to Minjung Kim and the St. Louis Art Museum for letting us do that, because it's not the way most shows move. They're usually booked and planned and orchestrated so far in advance that this had to be very nimble. So we were coming up with ideas and having to enact them pretty quickly. I think we confirmed the advisory group and then held it for St. Louis, particularly within like a few months.
Any other? Thank you, Caitlin. Hi, Shaka. Hey.
Hi, Shaka.
There are questions about email sign up, which we encourage you to do. Slam.org can give you all of the information that you would like. And we encourage you to check out the website for more information, like more public performances that we've got going, performances happening in the Gary Simmons Garage Lab. Jessica and the amazing team in learning and engagement has done an incredible job of providing a plethora of programming to support the show. And we're so grateful. So definitely check out the website to learn more information.
And to answer Shaka's question about other resources, there has been a blog where Andréa, you did a Q&A, there was a blog. There's this, and I think honestly, long-term, we all kind of hope that there's a possibility of doing some kind of an article or once this all ends, maybe we can have a, look back on everything that happened and do more of a resource. But there have been little tidbits that have come out so far to kind of explain elements. And the curatorial roundtable in the catalog is really interesting starting point for really thinking about that initial kind of advisory element. And then Tef and Wendell in the talk on Friday also talked about being in the advisory committee. So I think there are resources, they're just a little spread out.
Well, I'm gonna stop looking at I love hearing you guys talk about this show. I've heard about this show so much, of course, but it is always such a joy to hear you both talk about it and just talk about the process, because it's so unique to the show. And I think that we are all the better for it. So Thank you very much. I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this because I know you guys are both still really busy with this. So I just want to say thank you to you. Thank you to everyone that joined us today. This program is being recorded and will be eventually up on the museum's YouTube channel and website. Again, if you have not seen the exhibition, it will be up until January 1st, 2024. Hannah, I think you said 2025 earlier. So 2024.
It sounded good.
I know.
No, my mind is.
I was like, oh no, she's already skipped a year.
See, that shows the curator's mind. I can't, 2024 is already over.
Yeah. So please come if you have not seen it. And as Andrea mentioned, we still have lots of performances and things going on at the museum related to this. And that other conversation that was referenced last Friday, that too was recorded and will eventually be up on the museum's website as well. So,
And Jessica, before we go, because this is our last public talk or last public moment regarding the culture, I'm going to take it back to a theater term that we use. It's called leaving the ghost light on, right? And so whenever a theater is dark, there's always a light illuminating, not only for safety, but also just to hold the candle, right? For the moment, so it never ends. Yeah, just as a way to carry on. And so Hannah, I'm going to leave the ghost light on forever, not only for this project, but for the process. And as you said, we encourage people to continue this sort of work, to carry this with you. We're all the better for it. So thank you. It's been a ride. I'm still riding, but I would not have chosen any other person to ride with but you.
Oh.
So thank you. It's been incredible. Really.
And thank you to the museum. This is not something that's easy to pull off, and it took a lot of faith. So Jessica, thank you. Thank you to all the team, the crews. This is our last. We have to, our in-house designers, everybody. It takes a lot of faith to do something like this. That's never been done before at an institution. So we genuinely thank everybody for always, being there for it.
Yeah, many hands made this work. So thank you. All right, Jessica.
All right, thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Until then,
Until
bye
then.
everyone. Thanks for being with us today.